Okay, hello everyone. My name is Miss Sam. I am one of the teen librarians here at Levittown Public Library, and we are honored today to have Robert Celeste, who is one of the second assistant chiefs for the West Islip Fire Department, and he's going to tell us all about what it's like to be in the fire department and how he got there. And so I'm going to turn it over to you, Robert. Thank you so much for joining us today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are?
Thank you for having me today. As you mentioned, my name is Robert Celeste. I'm the current second assistant chief for the West Islip Fire Department, and I've been a member of the West Islip Fire Department for 21 years. In that span of 21 years, I've held the rank of lieutenant, captain, and then third assistant chief, and then more recently was moved up to second assistant chief. In those 21 years, I've learned a vast amount of information when it comes to firefighting. Everything involved in that has been really taught to me from the bottom up, and I'm very fortunate for everything I did. With that in mind, there's a great sense of community and family that really is integrated when it comes to this fire department, and it's made me a better person throughout my whole life, and it's something I'm so fortunate I've been part of. And it's not just the actual fire department, it's the people I'm associated with as well. They really make me who I am.
That's great. And then tell us, what drew you to wanting to join the fire department?
So when I was 16 years old, almost 17, my best friend John was interested in joining the fire department, and at that time, I didn't really know much about it. Ironically, my father was in the fire department as well, and even though he was in it, you would think I would be raised in that culture and everything, and I knew a little bit about it, but never had really a major interest in it. Once my best friend joined, I wanted to be in it like him, right? So I joined not knowing much about it, but I grew to love it really quick. It's one of those jobs that basically changes on a daily basis. It's not a typical desk job, as you can imagine. There's no way to predict what the day will bring, but it's cool because you get to be presented with many challenges and different aspects of life. And the way you have to look at it, when people need help, it's a nice way to give back to the community, to be able to help them to at least mitigate an issue, whether it's fire or EMS related.
Gotcha. And that actually brings up a great question, because I know, especially on Long Island, there's, this idea of, a volunteer firefighter or compared to like a career paid firefighter. So I know mostly on Long Island, it's mostly volunteer. So can you explain kind of what the difference is between the two and, regionally how that makes a difference?
Of course. So training varies all throughout the country. There's some basic national standards that are always followed. But there's many paths that people will take when it comes to firefighting. The career path is normally through civil service. And basically, there's many, many jobs out there involving fire department-based jobs. And if I could branch off a little more, there's two fields in the, let's say, fire service that normally involve different jobs. The first one's going to be being a firefighter, which makes sense. And the second one is being involved in EMS. And that's more of the side for EMT. And if I take the biggest of the fire departments, you have New York City. Okay, so for New York City, which is predominantly the biggest employer when it comes to those who are going to be firefighters for this area, they have a civil service test that basically they would take. And based on following those rules and regulations, they go to an academy. And from there, they become full-fledged firefighters or EMTs. So that's one career path, and you have a set schedule, you work different shifts, and it's organized similar and a little different than the way that the volunteer system would be. You're faced with the same obstacles, you're faced with the same challenges. It's the same experience, just on a different scale, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So being a volunteer myself, the requirements would basically be where you go to a fire academy, and it's normally held regionally. So if you're in Suffolk County or Nassau County, you would go to the regional fire academies, and they teach you everything from the bottom up. There's no prerequisites, right? As long as you hit the certain age, which for most places will be 18 years old, you could join. They set you up. All the training is always funded by the fire department, so it doesn't cost any out-of-pocket costs. But the academy for fire would involve basically going for both classroom and hands-on training that gives you the skills that you need to become a more proficient firefighter. It's not everything you need in life. It's the beginning basic requirements. And then from those basic requirements, you work with veteran members. And basically, as a result of that, you get to learn a lot over time through your experiences. The second route would be that of an EMT. And as an EMT, basically, you don't go to the fire academy, you go to EMT school, basically. And there's many offered. And what's nice about the EMT program is that it's a statewide accreditation. So I'll give you a good example. Most of the time, each county offers numerous EMT programs, even colleges. For example, I know Nassau Community College, Suffolk Community College, they do offer those programs. But if anyone you know goes away to school, like let's say upstate, those programs are reciprocated. So basically, if you get your accreditation, let's say in Albany, you still could be an EMT on Long Island because it's a New York State certification. Very, very popular and in more demand than ever before now. I know many EMTs that took the training through our fire department or any other place and have now moved into paid positions doing that on a full-time basis, along with being a volunteer. So it's a little bit of both sides of the story right there too. And there's been many great aspects of that. But that's basically in a nutshell the division of the two parts.
Gotcha. And then can you explain kind of what are some of the benefits of joining volunteer? Because obviously you hear volunteer, you're not getting paid for the position, but I know that there are a mass amount of benefits that come out of that. So what are some of the benefits that would come out of volunteering?
The biggest one I know that people really get drawn to would be funding for school. So I'll be honest, I'm not a full-time firefighter, right? I'm a public school teacher. And when it comes down to it, basically, I joined the fire department, wanted to learn a lot. So one thing I know that's really great is that if you're young and you join, as a retention piece, you'll get some aid to pay college at the SUNY level. So that's normally negotiated at a county level, but most of the time, basically, there's some money that goes for that in exchange for service. So basically, as long as you meet the requirements of your fire department, normally they will pay a good chunk of your, I guess you could say, tuition. That would be able to help with that too. But I'll be honest, there's different perks and different ideas with that, but the sense of wanting to help the community is really the biggest piece about it. For me, I always like to help people. It's just something, that I always have true to myself. When it comes down to it, basically, it's just something that I love to do. And if there's one commonality among everyone in the fire department, it's like one big family. I know it sounds maybe a little different to say that because it's a large family, but everyone's there to help each other out. And I think that's been really, really a nice piece. And that desire to help others and to learn is really the driving point that has led people to be successful in the fire department.
That's amazing. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about working conditions, obviously, because they change drastically within each profession. So obviously, we talked a little bit about, regionally. Is it something where if you join the fire academy, say in Nassau County or Suffolk County, is it easy to go from one county to another, from one state to another, or is it a little bit harder to move around?
So in a nutshell, it's kind of, if I could break it down like this, the fire departments, when I say fire department, they could be a standalone fire department where it's only fire, and some could be EMS agencies. Some of them are considered combination, meaning that some fire departments have both fire and EMS. Some are separate, some are together. It's a hodgepodge, basically, all throughout Suffolk and Nassau County. I know between Nassau and Suffolk County, the fire academies are pretty much comparable. So if I took my firefighter training, let's say in Nassau County, and I moved to Suffolk County, normally it's acknowledged. And you went through that program already, and they're pretty much the same when it comes to all the requirements. So that's pretty okay right there too. Others will look for what's called the national accreditation. So if you go out of state, for example, we have firefighters that left Long Island, they moved with their families to, let's say, North Carolina and South Carolina. The fact that you have the New York State requirements, that's one of the better tiered ones. So they normally look at that as a good base, as a starting point. Some of them accept it, but there's always going to be an academy that's involved. So for example, if I know a few friends that moved to, let's say, South Carolina, and they became firefighters, even though they've been a firefighter in New York for a while as a volunteer, they would still have to go through the fire academy at that fire department. So it's normally the same amount of time. They may know a little bit about it already, but procedures, requirements, and basically all the legal components have to be met in that jurisdiction. Because even though licensures might be okay from county to county, or in this case is an EMT from state to state, there's different components that have to be put into play to make sure they know the procedures and policies.
Of course, yeah, every place is a little bit different. So
Yeah.
and then one thing I forgot to ask you too, with the academy, about how long does it take to get through the academy?
So I can speak for Suffolk County. Suffolk County offers cohorts through the Suffolk County Fire Academy, and I'm sure it's comparable when it comes to Nassau, but you run it in cohorts. So the cohorts are offered at different times throughout the year, and registration takes place. And when you get into a cohort, that cohort has specific dates and times you would go to the Fire Academy and get the fundamentals of firefighting through classroom lecture. Picture it like a class with the same people that are in it. And basically, after you hit a threshold with a number of different classes, you would go to what's called the Fire Academy, and you would go over the hands-on components for that. So they teach you now everything you learn in the classroom on being in the field as a firefighter.
Right.
So that's normally how that goes. I think on average, most academies are about 3 months,
Okay.
give or take a little bit. They don't go every single day. Because don't forget, when you're in Nassau and Suffolk County, whether you're a college student or you have a full-time job, a little older, you just can't stop those and go to school. It doesn't work like that. So most of them are designed to revolve around people that have full-time jobs or full-time students. So for example, I have a few new members that just joined that are going to be going to the Fire Academy starting at the end of August. And all those classes are going to be in the evening. So if they take college classes in the morning or they have a job in the morning, they can attend those classes in the evening. The requirements are mandatory. You can't just miss any. Obviously, we're not talking about a general skill which you can make up. Hands-on training and things like that have to really be taught, and you're tested on it at the end as well.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's great that it's flexible so that you are still able to have, a full-time job or go to school. And I mean, that's amazing.
Mhm.
And then obviously we talked a little bit about, I know you said with in the like as a career paid firefighter that there's a certain set schedule and you get shifts and things like that. How does that work when it comes to volunteer? Obviously you have a full-time daytime job. So do you set your hours? Are they similar every week, or do they change? Do they fluctuate? How does that work?
That's a great question. So there's different models that each fire department prescribes to, or each EMS agency prescribes to. The more common one when it comes to EMS agencies is to sign up for shifts. So for example, I have a few that basically would, let's say, be on call or be at the station for 8 hours twice a week. Okay, and they work out with their officers when those times would be, and they basically would be in-house for that duration of time to handle alarms. For firefighting, it's not always like that. Some places might prescribe to that, but because the volume of fires is less than the volume of EMS calls, most have a percentage that they would have to do. So basically, as a new member, the percentages could range anywhere from 20 to 50%. So you get a pager, and basically when you're available, you go and you attend fires. And you might say, well, what happens if it happens during the day when you're at work? Like right now, there's a fire, what can I do? The world in some crazy ways balances itself out. So one thing I would mention is that shifts are not going to be just a traditional 9 to 5 or 8 to 4 or 3 to 11. There's many, many nights that we wake up from a dead sleep, we go to the firehouse, we go handle emergencies, and that's for EMS and fire. And the way you got to think of it, even though we're tired, the world doesn't stop, right? So everyone divvies up things a little bit here and there. Others do what's called overnight standby crews. So basically, if they do a shift that's maybe from midnight to 8 a.m. or something like that, they would be in-house and they would sleep until basically there's a call, and then they go on it basically. One other thing to mention, which I think is important, we talked about the fire academy, we talked about shifts, and we talked about how that works basically. It does change from place to place, but there's also meetings and trainings that you have to attend. So it's not just simple that you finish the academy and you're good to go for life. There's continuous training both in the EMS and the fire side. So most fire departments have weekly trainings, okay? And that varies from place to place, and also maybe monthly or bi-monthly meetings to keep everyone abreast of what's happening basically. So it's continuously learning your skill. And I'll be honest, when I took the fire academy, when I went to fire academy, let's say 20 years ago, it's greatly different than it was back in 1999. So I could definitely say training has changed. The technology is fantastic. And I do have to say one great thing about the fire departments, people always say, is it massively different from a paid service compared to a volunteer service? And there's definitely differences, but the equipment, the training, and the technology is up to par as any place would be throughout the country. And I do know that Nassau and Suffolk have some of the best equipment out there, which gives us the tools to do our job efficiently.
That's great. And that actually leads very nicely into my next question, which was about technology. Obviously, technology is constantly changing. It changes how all of us do our jobs. I mean, look at Zoom with the pandemic and everything else.
Yeah.
So obviously, I know you were saying that you guys do a lot of meetings and trainings, to stay on top of things like that. But can you think of anything specific that that is technology that has changed within your job in the last couple of years? And do you think anything is going to be changing in the future that you can possibly foresee?
Absolutely. Well, I'll just tell you right now, our turnout gear, which weighs a good chunk actually, between that and our pack, ranges between 50 to 70 pounds. That basically is well equipped as fire resistant, not fireproof. But the equipment is so good these days that it gives you a good buffer between a room that has a lot of heat. And basically, it's not the greatest point to bring up right now, but that equipment really keeps us ultra safe. When you're trained properly and you know the signs of what you're going to see in a fire-based or emergency condition, it really does provide that buffer, and our equipment really keeps us safe. When you talk about technology, there's actually going to be one tool that comes to my mind. It's called the thermal imaging camera. So basically, it looks like a camera that you hold up in your hand, and it has a screen on it. But the screen doesn't just show what you're looking at; it shows temperature differences. So you might say, well, what does that do exactly? Well, it's been used greatly, and I use it more often than you could ever believe, to pinpoint exactly where fire would be, because in a blacked out room where there's a lot of heat, you may not be able to see fire immediately, right? So it kind of pinpoints heat in different areas, so you can kind of see exactly where the source of the fire might be. And another piece, which you don't think about, it shows temperature differences. So if you're in a room where you think there might be a fire and you're doing a search, you could see basically victims, people. And you got to think about that, because our body temperature would be different than the actual normal temperature of a room, or in a really hot room along the way too. So search and rescue, along with firefighting skills, that tool itself has become a major component. Another one we have, which I personally really think it's a great game changer for the fire service, is what's called a pack tracker. So what is that exactly? Everyone has a Scott pack, which they put on. It looks like a backpack with a air cylinder, and you have a mask over your face. And basically that gives us air as we're in a fire with no oxygen, right? Or actually no oxygen, but not air to breathe in, right? So God forbid there was ever an emergency where a firefighter, goes unconscious, or there's a real life in threat. We always have a team that's ready to get that firefighter out, but in a house, you may not know exactly where that person is. The pack tracker actually is a signaling device, a separate device that shows you your proximity to where the person is. It's a little more intricate, but if you're actually getting closer to the person, it signals that you're getting closer to that person. So, if you're maybe to the left of me and I go to the right, the signal will become less, showing me that I'm not getting closer to you. Of course, it's just one of many tools to help us rescue people, but I think that's a big one, because it's just another tool to help to get to those people at a quicker pace, if that makes sense. And another thing is going to be, it's very common that at fires, there's more than one fire department that's going to actually be there to help out. So that tool will be used for all fire departments in our nearest locale to help us basically search for ourselves in case something does happen.
That's amazing. Yeah, and that will definitely cut down on those times on finding people and being able to get them out faster. So that's great.
There's a lot of great things, but those are two cool, I say cool, but
Yeah.
two things that really 20 years ago, I didn't think they even had.
Right. And that also leads into my next question, which was about teamwork. Obviously, we talk about in different jobs, sometimes you're working on your own, sometimes you're working within a team.
Sure.
Obviously, I would say within the fire department, as we were just talking, there's a lot of camaraderie. There's a big team effort there. So I think, is it safe to say that in order to be a part of the fire department, you really need to be able to work within a team setting?
Yeah, it's definitely a team player mentality by all means. It's very rare that you would be doing something by yourself. Think of it like the buddy system. If you're going into a fire, or you're doing any skills even on the outside of a fire, it could be a car accident, you're never by yourself, okay? You always work in teams. There's different routines and procedures, but yes, you do work with people. And, you know, it's one of those things that, you know, that's when the family piece comes together. You know, I could name everyone at my fire department right now, and I know if I'm going in a fire with them or if I'm doing something, I could see who they are immediately. And it's interesting because as a chief, I might be inside the fire coordinating things a little bit here and there, but I can see in the back of their jackets who they are, and I know who's with me and who's doing what. So it's interesting because you need to know your personnel, you need to know your skills and abilities, and everyone has different training levels. So it's nice to know who's there. But the cool thing about it too is that after any alarm, there's always like a little bit of a debriefing, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
In other words, it's an ever going, ongoing skill, right? So nothing's ever perfect, but we always learn how to become better over time. So it's common after some type of emergency, let's say after a house fire, we would critique to see things that went good, maybe things that we have to improve on, but this is part of the learning curve, right? Like I mentioned a while back, you know, we go to the fire academy, but that's only a little bit of the story. I think it's a way to improve your skill and to learn better and to pass that on to each other. It's really a big piece too. So, you know, things we learn, it's good to pass it on to others, especially for newer members, because that experience is what makes you better along the way.
Right. And then actually that again, very lovely meets goes into my next question
Yeah.
was about transferring of skills. So obviously you're learning a lot of amazing skills within the fire department or EMS, whichever path you decide to take. So can you think of any other like paid careers that those skills might work into or that you may be able to, you know, get that training from and be able to go into afterwards?
So the two biggest fields I know that a lot of people who are in our fire department have been in involve police work and also the fire department and even bigger EMS. It's one of those fields that have so many job opportunities and are stepping stones. So if I take EMS for 1 second, because we did mention it's part of the fire service altogether, being part of an EMS agency, people join again, like me, not knowing what to expect, but they learn to love it because it's something they just didn't know much about, except maybe seeing it on TV or hearing about it from a friend. But if it's something they really truly like, a lot of times it's a stepping stone. There are people who have been on career paths to be EMTs. A lot of times you could get a higher certification by going for more schooling as a paramedic. Okay. And sometimes people love it so much, they take different paths. They become more in the nursing field, the physician's assistant field. And these are like stepping stones. But if you enjoy doing field work where you're helping people in the field, those are different eye-opening areas as well. And a lot of times they see that because when there's patients we have, we bring them to a hospital. So it's being exposed to those different type of careers that really people say, wow, that seems interesting. I always want to think about maybe doing that.
Yeah.
So those are little things to keep in the back of your mind when it comes to EMS. For fire, many people basically do desire to want to become a firefighter. And you're right, a bulk of New York is going to be a volunteer service. There are definitely some career opportunities within Suffolk County, Nassau County, the city, even upstate. But honestly, even outside of New York, there's many career opportunities in different states as well. They post them all the time. I know there's many civil service jobs and different hiring opportunities. A lot of it's word to mouth. There's flyers and everything like that. But once you see about one place hiring, there are other places that hire as well. And you start to hear about that more and more over time. So states like Florida, for example, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina are just a few places, oh, Maryland as well, that have booming populations. And as a result of that, need more fire service personnel and EMTs as well. So the more you have training for, the more, I guess you could say, appealing you become to other places. So it's one thing to have fire training. It's another thing to have fire and EMS training.
Right.
Because again, it gives you a background, you know what you have. And when they hire you, they know you know a little bit about it already. It's not just someone who's brand spanking new. And if I could add one more thing too, a lot of colleges that you want to basically move into an emergency field, basically, let's say you want to become a nurse or a physician assistant, for example, you need some type of past experience. I'll tell you right now, there's no better experience than being involved in a medical field at an EMS or fire agency where you're doing little skills like this already that shows your energy, your excitement to basically be part of something bigger in the long haul.
Yeah. I mean, that's great. That, I mean, all these skills can just open up the world for different advancement opportunities and career opportunities. That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I know another thing that you had mentioned within the fire department, I know that there are, different ranks and different ways to advance yourself throughout. So how does that system work a little bit? If you could give us a little bit of how do you move from one, rank to another?
I'll speak on behalf of the volunteer side. Basically, when it comes down to it, you join as what's called a trainee. Trainee basically means you're brand spanking new. Every place is a little different, but your job is very limited. They give you basic jobs to do because you don't know anything. You have to assume it's a blank slate, right? As you're going through the fire academy, you're still going to be a trainee. Normally, after you're done with the fire academy, you have the foundations, basically, and you get moved up to what's called a probationary member. A lot of times that jargon's called a probie. You've heard that before. And as a probie, basically, you're under the wing of more senior members to give you that hands-on skill, not anymore in the fire academy, but on the scene of emergencies. After all, think, as a probie, you might have been in the fire department for only 6 months. So you're not going to be going in the fire and just expected to do everything under the sun, right? But eventually, after your probation period, which could be anywhere between 1 and 2 years, you become a firefighter. That's basically what you become. A lot of times they call that first grade firefighters, but that means you have the firefighter status. You made it off your probationary period. Every town offers different training opportunities and your level of involvement. After a few years, maybe, it depends on your company level that you're in within the fire department, you could basically run for a position. You could run for what's called a lieutenant position, and eventually you could run for a captain position. There's different layers of lieutenants. Some have like second lieutenants and first lieutenants, but normally the introductory level of an officer would be basically a second lieutenant, I'm sorry. So as a second lieutenant, basically, you get voted in by members of your company. That's how it works on our side. So basically, if it's me and somebody else running, okay, whoever the company seems as the most appropriate would be the one that they vote on. And it's a democratic system. And then that person becomes a second lieutenant or a lieutenant. They can move up to another position after they serve enough time in that position. They move up to that position. They move up to another position, and the ranks tend to move up. I'm going to tell you right now, Samantha, when I joined when I was 17, I was very content doing what I wanted to do. I was going to college for teaching. I was looking forward to that. And I still make a joke today. How did this happen? Right. So it's just a progression sometimes. People, it's what you make out of it, basically. I've known some great people that have been firefighters their whole career. One person is Dave right now. And Dave, basically, when it comes down to it, has been a firefighter his whole life. But he's like that veteran member that has always looked out for me. And I would not be where I am without him today. And another person, not to destroy this in there, is a man, his name is Joey. And he is like, he's like the go-to person, if that makes sense. He knows that place and he knows the fire service. He knows operations. He knows everything in and out. And he's like someone I would aspire to be like because he's just good. And I think that might be not the best word to say, but if I had to sum him up, he's someone that I'm always fortunate has mentored me. And by all means, if he was not around, I would not be where I am today. So I think a lot of it is just the fact that it's what you make out of it then, basically. If you're happy just doing what you're doing, that's great. But there's always people basically that learn over time. And my biggest attribution would be if I learn enough like Joey did, I could help the younger generation as they would move up one day, because I can't do this forever, right? So it's not possible. At some point, we'll have to stop it someday. But it's a good feeling to know that you could teach the younger group, like how Joey taught me, and I could hopefully pass that on as a way to continue with everyone learning.
Right. And then I know we talked about, that there's no real requirements other than an age requirement as far as joining the academy. Obviously, a lot of the teens that I'm talking to right now wouldn't necessarily meet that age requirement. So is there anything that you can think of that they could be doing now while they're in high school, if they're interested in this, even to work on some skills or just to get an idea of what it would be like to see if this is something they're really interested in?
Most definitely. At an early age, every fire department or EMS agency has let's say a youth squad or an explorers program, or some of them are called a junior fire department. And when they join, they get to learn little aspects of what the fire service or EMS agencies are all about. They don't do exactly identical to what those in the fire department or EMS agencies do. But at some ages, when they're maybe 14, 15, 16, they're allowed to participate more and more as they learn to build up those skills. The idea is to expose them to the fire department or this service we're talking about to see if they actually like it. There have been many people I know that join at a young age. They go through the juniors or an explorer's post, and then they eventually go ahead basically and they join a fire department as a full-fledged member. There's a few students I've taught that are leaving high school now and have joined a local fire department. Others join EMS agencies. It depends on what you like basically along the way. But that's basically the taste you get beforehand.
That's great. Yeah, it'll give you a little bit of exposure to at least see if it's something that you want to pursue.
And then they do different skills. There's a lot of fun stuff with that too. And again, even at that early age, they become like a small family. So it's quite common that as they age out of the juniors or the explorers, they will become full, fledged members for that local fire department or EMS agency. And it's pretty fun. If you enjoy it, it's something that's gonna be a lifelong period of learning and family oriented type of community service. So
yeah. And then what would you say, very simply, what is the best part of your job and what would you say is the most challenging part?
The best part of my job, I would say, is no matter what time it is, I always look forward to helping other people. And I think it's just a sense that we try to help people when they need help, which is a good piece of gratification, right? No one calls the fire department or 911 in general when things are going great, right? But when you're able to help them out even a little bit, you're trying to make things just a little better for them. So that actually is a good feeling right there too. And it's not always like TV. It's not going to be like every call is some grand, fantastic change in someone's life. Like it's not going to be as crazy as you would see on TV, but making those connections and the fact that you're helping people of your own community even gives you more of a gratification for that. When it comes to challenges, I wouldn't use the word challenge. I would use the word opportunity. It's being kept up to date with everything that's going on and making sure that you have all the training and requirements to help those people in need. So for example, early on, we talked about the thermal imaging camera, right? Knowing about that, how it works, it's not a hard thing to do, but being aware of those updated technologies. Or I'll go to the other side, a part of the fire service that a lot of times I know people don't always mention about is EMS. By far, the number of EMS alarms and the need for trained and skilled EMTs is needed more than ever before. So those who go into that field, it's not just you get your certificate and say, have a great day. You need to continually learn your skill, practice your skill, and being aware of that and making sure you can balance out that work and life type of scenario is something that's really, really big right there.
Yeah.
I hope that answered a little bit. I don't know if that was the best way to.
No, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I've always said, every day is a new learning opportunity. So every day within the job, you're still learning more. You're always absorbing new knowledge. Every situation is different. So you're still learning from everything that you do. So that's definitely great.
Most definitely.
Definitely. And then my very last question is, do you have any last words of advice, words of wisdom, anything that you want to share with the teens in our community from you?
I know it's something, if you ever think about going into that field, whether it's an EMS field or a firefighter field, definitely don't shy away from it. At least look into it. You never just walk into a fire department or an EMS agency and say, I'm ready to join, and you join right there. There's many layers that are involved before you join. And one thing I know we always try to do is, when someone walks in to join, we just don't say, come on in. We want them to see what we're all about. So whether they attend maybe a few training sessions or kind of get an overview from like an interview committee on seeing what life is really like, it's a different culture by all means. It's a group of its own with training requirements and everything. So it's something you could definitely look into a lot and try to get a feel for it. So there's always people who are willing to tell you the truth about it, to try to see what things are all about. Because listen, like everything in life, not always everything's perfect, right? Sometimes things are great. Sometimes you have good days and bad days, but you continually look at the positive side for everything. And again, you go back to the idea, if you love the community and you love where you live and you love to help people, this is definitely something that you would like to do.
Yeah. Great. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today. During the month of July and August, the Levittown Library is going to be celebrating our first responders. So we just want to say thank you for everything that you do and the service to the community and everyone, especially during this last crazy year. So thank you so much for joining us, and we've learned so much. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Samantha. Thanks for having me today.
Of course.